BBC Radio London 8:40. I'm Jumoke. Now, my final guest on the programme this morning brings a sense of uplifting comfort despite the personal challenges he's overcome and turned them into what can only be described as a love song to London. Psalms for the City is the title of John Paul Flintoff's latest book, and he joins me now. John Paul, thanks so much for joining us. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me here.
Well, do you know what? When I saw your name on my list, this was, or the presser came in, I was like, oh my gosh, years and years ago, you won't remember this, but I interviewed you about the very first time you ever made a shirt.
I totally remember. I'm really pleased that you did. Yeah, I did. Thank you.
Because I thought it was really revolutionary. I remember having that conversation with you. But of course, times have changed since then, a bit,
Yes.
if not a lot. And you've been through quite a personal journey, haven't you?
I have. So in a nutshell, and not to be sort of too glib about it, but time is short, I had a series of traumatic events happen, and they involved people dying and being unwell, and I had a loss of work, and I basically spun gradually into very bad depression and sort of thought that there was not much point in me being around anymore.
Gosh.
Not sort of. I absolutely thought that. And when I eventually, after 6 months, admitted that to somebody, I got help and I ended up in psychiatric hospital, and I was there for 8 weeks, and it was dreadful at the times. It felt so dreadful, although looking back, I wouldn't take it away for anything. It was a wonderful opportunity to see things in a new light and to understand myself better. And to be confronted with the despair of so many other people was really remarkable. The sort of the straightforward honesty of people saying how they felt was just amazing. What an extraordinary gift. And anyway, to cut a long story short, I spent much of the following years wandering around in a daze. And that was partly because my psychiatrist said get lots of exercise and walking around the city is free. Mm-hmm. And after therapy sessions, I'd been advised by a friend who's actually quite a well-known psychotherapist, and she said the best thing to do after therapy is to take a long journey home or something, because then you can reflect on what you've talked about. And I didn't particularly need to do a long journey home, so I went and sat in the church next door to my therapist, and it happened to be a really beautiful church in Sloane Square that William Morris and others in the pre-Raphaelite had decorated. And I'm not a churchgoer by background. I've not been brought up to that. But I found myself telling my therapist that I realized that I had lost all faith in something. I didn't know what, but I had lost faith in myself, that's for sure, because I genuinely thought I was worthless. I mean, I find it quite hard even now to look back on that and think, how could that have been? How could I really think that? But I really just thought it would be better for everybody if I wasn't here. And I just believed it. Not a nice place to be. And sorry, this is getting into a longer answer than I'd expected. But the thing is that I went into this church, and I went into other churches because I was wandering around all over the place. And because of the lack of work, I hadn't got that much money, so I couldn't just sit in cafes as I might have done in the past. So churches were free if they were open. And some of them had little leaflets as well. And I'm sure you're familiar with the idea of this kind of awful, nagging, negative, self-critical voice. What I found really helped was in the churches, whether I believed it, whatever it was or not, if I recited some of these prayers that had been printed on leaflets, they silenced that voice. And so there was no doubt that something was working for me. And I carried around one of those things for months, and it sort of, you know how bits of paper folded in your pocket go all crumbly around the folds. It did that, and it got to this place where it was almost like a lace work, but I could still see it. But I mean, I'd memorized it by then, so eventually I had the courage to throw away the piece of paper, and I'd memorized the prayer, and I was saying it to myself. And I started just thinking churches are a good place to get some solace, and the people who I did occasionally talk to were very kind. And so it gave me a feeling that I would like to look at the Bible instead of previously thinking that is so not for me, it's all bonkers. And so I did. And I really like the way that the Psalms in the Bible are basically an opportunity for the writer of the Psalms to vent whatever's going on. So you can go from this really bright, cheerful, oh, I'm so delighted, sing to the Lord, all you hills, to then sort of gnashing of teeth and wanting to smite all your enemies. I just like the honesty of it, and it made me want to write some myself.
And that's what you've done in this book called Psalms for the City, originally original poetry inspired by the places we call home. Why that phrase, inspired by the places we call home?
Because it sort of developed organically. I just drew a lot of things near me because we weren't allowed out much at the time I was writing this in lockdown. And so I'm also absolutely mad keen on drawing. Drawing is a great relief for someone like me who's a words person. I'm a writer. Yeah. And like I just said, words can become quite obsessive and quite imprisoning, and they're very narrow and they don't always describe exactly what we want. But drawing a picture, I can really feel my feelings in that moment, and I'm very present. I can't be worrying about what happened in, 2007 or something, because I can't draw if I'm not present. So for me, it's always been a good way of being present. I would draw these streets and the trees when they came into flower, and the weeds on the local council estate because no one was weeding in lockdown, and they just look beautiful. Weeds, when they're given a bit of a chance, can fly up and become a meter high and have tons of flowers. I just started thinking, well, this place looks quite nice. This place is good. There's some good stuff here. So I'm not trying to present a kind of everything in London is marvelous. I'm trying to be honest and all round, but noticing that I'm allowed to really love it too. So for me, you kindly mentioned that last time I was on it was because I'd made a shirt. Creativity is such a way back to being healthy. Creativity is freedom. I can't draw a picture if I'm compelled to. I have to really want to, and I'm free. And I feel suddenly the urge to write a poem or to pray or to however I do that, and I don't know that I know how to do that, or to draw a picture or write a poem. All of those things are an expression of my freedom and my gratitude towards something, and I can't quite tell you what the something is.
What I love about the book is just how, as you say, it is about being present, even when whether it's you writing a piece of poetry or you painting or drawing a picture. Interestingly enough, the things, the sort of touchstones that are there are the things that you are experiencing in the everyday life. For instance, that poem about parents making music, two people coming together, which is such a lovely poem. And also the other thing to say is that all of these, in the ilk of the Psalms are the idea that this is what King David, the psalmist or whoever, was seeing at the time, and you are doing the same by replicating it, but also saying this is London. In effect, this is your playground of creativity, where you can pull those strings and be present at the same time.
Absolutely, and a massive inspiration for me, because I happened to study literature, was a medieval manuscript that had the Psalms of King David. But it was an incredibly rich piece of work commissioned by a very rich family. And they illustrated it all around the edges, not only with sort of flowers and leaves and the things that you do in manuscripts, but also drawings of biblical stories and drawings of their everyday life. So there's someone wandering around sowing seeds and chasing crows away, that kind of thing. So my original idea was, I'll do illustrations around the Psalms of King David. And then my literary agent said, why don't you write Psalms? And I thought, well, hang on, that sounds a bit cheeky. Like, how could I possibly write Psalms? And then I thought, well, they're poems. They're my poems, and I'll call them Psalms. But it just gave me a great structure and a concept. And then I could think, I'm writing these things, and I'm writing them in thanks to whatever I think I'm mean when I'm saying God, and that thing that's greater than me. In the 12 steps they talk about a higher power if you're not comfortable with the word God. And I thought, whatever that thing that is unknowable to me, to which I feel so grateful for now actually still being alive and seeing that I am not worthless, I'm going to write some poems. And it's just fun, quite honestly, because I'm quite conscious that this might sound terribly solemn and quite miserable. I've said things like psychiatric hospital. There are poems where I definitely want people to laugh.
I love your false hope haiku. I will be happy if they apologize first. Years past, what a waste. I just thought that was absolutely brilliant.
I really love haikus because they're so quick. I mean, I might take a little while writing it, but it doesn't take months. It takes, a few minutes or at most an hour. So yeah, and I hope you notice also at the very back there's a write your own psalm, and I hope that people who buy psalms for the city, whether they live in a city or not, will write their own psalm and draw on that page too.
How cathartic has this process been for you?
It's been very cathartic, but it's also been enormously uncomfortable, as it is with every book. This is the first book that has really explicitly said that I'm grateful to anything like any kind of God. And that feels like that's not my normal. That's not what I've grown up in. That's not what most of my friends talk about. But, it was more uncomfortable to text 3 close friends and say I'm going into psychiatric hospital and to truly believe that they would think I was such a loser that they would never be back in touch with me again. And for the 2 hours it took for any of them to get back to me, I really thought, well, that's it. I'm on my own, and let's see how I fare on my own. And they came back. Of course, they came back. And every time some kindness like that happened, mad though it may seem to some people, I thought it's like I'm surrounded by angels. It's like, who are all these angels who keep on being nice to me?
Yeah. And just in conclusion, so faith now is at the strong core of you. Has it? Do you have a name for it? I mean, would you say I'm a Christian or a Jew or whatever it might be, or not?
I'm very wary of. It feels like my own private little thing, just between me and God.
Yeah.
But I did get baptized, but because I live near Golders Green, and a lot of my close friends and acquaintances and people close to me are Jewish, I don't want my faith to be ever perceived as any kind of a barrier or a stick or something I'm selling to anyone. One of the most touching things was a friend who was dying asked me to pray to her. She's was Muslim, as she was dying in hospital. So she asked me to pray a psalm in hospital with her there alive and then at her funeral. And it meant so much to me that we have so much in common, and that she was willing to let me use a thing that means something to me, and that it then meant something to her because it meant something to me. It didn't mean she had to change her religion. She didn't have to do anything like that. So I'm very wary, as you can hear, of being too clearly one thing or another, but I go to church and I like it.
Right. Well, that's the best. That's all one needs to say. John Paul, it's been an absolute delight to have you back on the programme. I hope we can have you back again soon. Let me just give people the details. Psalms for the City. John Paul Flintoff, original poetry inspired by the places we call home. And is out now, published by SPCK. And obviously, if you type in that title, you can find it. And it's an illustrated book. So it's the Psalms or the poetry alongside illustrations as well. My thanks to John Paul Flintoff for joining us. We've been